A millionaire found an abandoned girl on the street with a baby in her arms. When asked where she came from, her answer shocked him. The San Diego city in USA was famous for its cobblestone streets, vibrant colonial facades, and a calm atmosphere that attracted tourists from all over. However, a sudden storm that erupted over the city that afternoon shattered the calm. The rain came down hard, turning the streets into small streams and forcing the few passers-by to scramble for shelter under overhangs and doorways. Nicholas Hamilton, a 53-year-old local businessman, was driving his old but well-kept Range Rover through the narrow streets. He was a respected man, known for his business success, yet lately he felt that something was missing in his life. He had achieved prosperity, but that prosperity didn't fill the emptiness he felt. That afternoon, as the rain pounded on the car roof, he was lost in thought, reflecting on his increasingly monotonous routine. As he rounded a corner, Nicholas was forced to brake suddenly. A traffic light had turned red, and the traffic ahead was slow due to water pooling in the road. That's when something caught his eye. On the sidewalk, huddled against a wall, was a little girl, no older than 7, completely drenched. What he at first thought was just a shadow turned out to be a young girl holding a small bundle close to her chest. Nicholas frowned, intrigued. He wasn't usually one to get involved in strangers' problems, but something about this scene stirred him in a different way. Looking closer, he realized that the bundle in the girl's arms was, in fact, a baby. A young girl, alone in the rain, caring for someone even smaller. Nicholas's heart tightened, and he felt an unexpected urge to help. Without a second thought, he parked his car by the curb and turned off the engine. The rain pelted his face as soon as he stepped out, but he didn't mind. He approached the girl cautiously, careful not to frighten her more than she already seemed. "Hello, sweetheart," he said, his voice gentle as he tried to be heard over the noise of the storm. "What are you doing here all alone in the rain?" Nicholas asked gently. The girl looked up slowly, her face a portrait of fear and hopelessness. She held the baby close to her chest, as if it were the only thing in her world that still made sense. Nicholas kneeled beside her, doing his best to appear as non-threatening as possible. "Where are your parents?" he asked, searching for some rational explanation to make sense of this situation. "I don't have parents," she whispered, her voice as fragile as a thread about to snap. "They left me here." Nicholas felt a tight knot in his stomach. He knew that even though this small town seemed welcoming, it harbored its secrets. But he never would have imagined that a child could be abandoned like this, let alone with a baby in her arms. "Who left you here?" Nicholas asked, his tone now laced with concern. "Do you know their name?" The girl hesitated, as though the answer she was about to give might bring danger. "The woman from the orphanage," she finally replied, staring at the ground. "She said she didn't want to take care of me and my brother anymore." Nicholas was silent for a moment, taking in what he had just heard. An orphanage leaving a child out on the street. That was unthinkable, even in the most distant places. What was really going on in this town? Nicholas realized he couldn't just walk away. Something was very wrong. "Let's get out of this rain, okay?" he said softly, reaching his hand toward the girl. "I'll take you somewhere safe, and we'll figure this out." The girl hesitated, but Nicholas's gentle tone reassured her. Finally, she took his hand, and they walked together to his car. Nicholas opened the back door and helped her in, making sure the baby was safe and secure. As he got back in the driver's seat, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the girl trying to comfort the baby, who whimpered from cold or hunger. As he drove through the flooded streets, Nicholas couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he hadn't anticipated. He needed to find out what was happening at that orphanage, and most importantly, how he could help these 2 young lives that had suddenly crossed his path. The rain kept falling steadily as Nicholas navigated the winding streets, his mind racing with thoughts. In the back seat, the girl and the baby sat quietly, except for an occasional muffled sob. Nicholas wanted to ask questions to understand what was going on, but he knew he needed to tread carefully. The last thing Nicholas wanted was to frighten that little girl who had already been through so much. Finally, he decided to stop at a small coffee shop he knew well, a quiet, cozy place where he could warm up the kids and maybe learn more about their situation. He parked the car in front of the cafe, a rustic spot with soft lights spilling out through fogged-up windows. Stepping out of the car, he grabbed an Umber Lucy from the trunk and approached the back door. "Sweetheart, let's go inside and warm up a bit," he said, opening the door for the girl. She nodded, still clutching the baby tightly as she climbed out from under Nicholas's Umber Lucy. As they entered the cafe together, they noticed the welcoming atmosphere and the aroma of freshly baked bread. The cafe owner, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Bailey, looked at Nicholas in surprise, noticing the soaked children he had brought with him. "Nicholas, what happened? Who are these children?" she asked, concerned. "It's a long story, Bailey," Nicholas replied, leading the girl to a table by the fireplace. "But I could use some help. Could you bring us something warm to drink and maybe a towel? They're freezing." Of course, right away," Mrs. Bailey said, hurrying into the kitchen. Nicholas helped the girl sit down and gently took the baby from her arms, cradling him carefully and noticing just how small and fragile he was. The girl watched him closely, still uncertain about the man who had suddenly become her protector. "What's your name?" Nicholas asked gently, hoping to ease the silence. "Lucy, sir," she replied, her voice low and hesitant. "And your little brother's name," he continued, trying to earn her trust. "Ryan. He's very little," Lucy said with a worried expression. Nicholas nodded, feeling a wave of compassion for this young girl, already carrying such a heavy burden. "Lucy, can you tell me more about what happened? Why did the woman from the orphanage leave you out here?" Lucy looked down, her small hands clutching the edge of the table. Nicholas waited patiently without pressing her, as Mrs. Bailey returned with 2 cups of hot chocolate and a soft towel. "Here, drink this. It'll help warm you up," Nicholas said, sliding one of the cups toward Lucy. Lucy held the cup with both hands, but didn't drink right away. An uneasy silence hung between them until finally Lucy spoke up, her voice barely steady. "The woman from the orphanage said she couldn't take care of Ryan and me anymore." Her eyes flickered with pain. She was angry. Always angry. She said we were a burden, that no one wanted kids like us. Nicholas felt a tightness in his chest as he listened. How could anyone be so cruel to a child, he thought, his heart aching. Lucy went on, "She put us in her car and drove us into the city. When we got there, she just left us. I tried to follow her, but she got back in the car and drove away." Lucy's voice caught, and Nicholas saw the tears she was holding back slide silently down her cheeks. "Do you know where that orphanage is?" Nicholas asked, a quiet anger simmering within him. Lucy nodded slightly. "I do. But I don't want to go back there," she whispered, her voice so soft it was almost a breath. Nicholas reached across the table, placing his hand on hers, offering her a quiet reassurance. "You won't have to go back," he promised, "but we need to figure out what's going on there. If they did this to you and Ryan, imagine what they might be doing to other kids." Lucy looked up at Nicholas, her large eyes filled with a mix of fear and something that looked like hope. For the first time, she felt like someone actually cared, like someone was willing to stand up for her. "I trust you," she said at last, her voice filled with a strength Nicholas hadn't expected. And I'm going to help you, Lucy. I'm going to find out what's happening and make sure you and Ryan are safe. That's my promise." Nicholas and Lucy formed an unlikely bond inside the cafe as the storm outside continued to batter the small town. They were both driven by a desire for justice and a desire to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. Nicholas understood he was about to face something far bigger than he had anticipated, but he also knew he couldn't turn back. He was in this now, and nothing would make him quit. The storm outside San Diego showed no signs of easing. Heavy raindrops drummed against the cafe's windows with a hypnotic rhythm, while inside, the warmth of the fireplace and the comforting scent of hot chocolate filled the air. Nicholas Hamilton sat at the table with Lucy and baby Ryan, trying to absorb the gravity of the situation unfolding before him. Lucy, still trembling, clutched the hot chocolate that Mrs. Bailey had brought over. Her small hands could barely wrap around the mug, and she sipped cautiously, as if she wasn't used to kindness. Baby Ryan slept on Nicholas's lap, his breath soft and steady. Nicholas couldn't help but notice how small and frail Ryan looked, his cheeks slightly sunken, a clear sign of malnutrition. Nicholas's mind was spinning. He was a practical man, used to handling issues swiftly and effectively, but this was something entirely different. He felt an immense responsibility for these two children, who had suddenly crossed his path in the midst of the storm. He looked at Lucy, who now seemed a bit calmer, though fear still lingered in her eyes. "Lucy, can you tell me more about what happened?" Nicholas asked gently, his tone soft and unhurried, making sure not to push her too hard. "You don't have to be afraid. You're safe here," he added. Lucy bit her lower lip, uncertain. She seemed to be torn between wanting to open up and the fear of trusting a stranger. Finally, as if deciding Nicholas was worthy of her trust, she began to speak, her voice low and filled with emotion. "Ryan and I were living in an orphanage," she started, looking down at the cup in her hands. "It was a big place, with lots of kids. But the lady who took care of us, she wasn't kind. She always said we were a burden, that nobody wanted kids like us." Hearing this, Nicholas felt a painful knot in his chest. He couldn't fathom how anyone could be so heartless toward a child, but he sensed there was more to come, so he stayed silent, letting Lucy continue at her own pace. One day, she got really mad because Ryan was crying. He cried a lot because he was hungry, but she never gave us enough food. Lucy's voice shook, and she held her cup tightly, as if its warmth could give her the strength to go on. She said she was done with us, that she couldn't take care of two useless kids. Senora Bailey, who was quietly organizing cups on the counter, overheard Lucy's words and paused, visibly affected. She shot a concerned glance at Nicholas, who responded with a small nod, signaling he needed to hear more before reacting. She put us in her car and drove us into the city. Then she stopped on a corner and told me to get out with Ryan. He said no one would care if we disappeared, that no one would miss us. Lucy finally lifted her gaze to Nicholas, her eyes welling up with tears. I tried to follow her, but she just left, leaving us there in the rain. Nicholas felt a simmering anger building inside him. The thought of someone abandoning two defenseless kids on the street, left to fend for themselves, was something he couldn't bear. He knew he needed to act, but wanted to fully understand the situation first. "Do you remember the name of the orphanage, Lucy? Or where it's located?" Nicholas asked, his voice steady but firm. Lucy nodded slowly. "Yes, I remember. It's out of town on the road to Guanajuato, a big, old place called the House of Children." Nicholas paused, absorbing the information. He'd heard of that orphanage before, but had never paid it much attention. It was just another institution among many in the area. But now he sensed something was deeply wrong there. "Lucy, you did the right thing by telling me," Nicholas said, trying to convey calm and reassurance. "We're going to find out what's going on at that orphanage, and I promise nothing bad will happen to you or Ryan." Despite her fear, Lucy felt a bit of relief wash over her at Nicholas's words. It was as if a weight was beginning to lift from her shoulders, though she was still apprehensive. "You're not going to send me back there, right?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Nicholas shook his head. "No, Lucy. I promise you won't be going back there. We'll handle this another way." Just then, Mrs. Bailey approached the table, setting down a plate of freshly baked cookies. She placed it in front of Lucy, who eyed the cookies with a mix of hunger and hesitation. "Go ahead and eat, dear. They're all for you," Mrs. Bailey said with a warm smile. Finally, Lucy picked up a cookie and began nibbling on it, still a bit wary but clearly hungry. Nicholas watched her, his heart heavy. He knew these kids needed more than just a warm meal and a safe place to stay. They needed protection, and he was determined to provide it. While Lucy ate quietly, Nicholas pulled out his phone and made a few calls. First, he reached out to an influential friend in the city, Commissioner Matthews, someone who could help look into the orphanage. Next, he called his lawyer, giving a quick rundown of the situation and asking for advice on the legal steps to ensure Lucy and Ryan's safety. The following morning, the gentle sunrise over San Diego began breaking through the leftover storm clouds from the night before. The city streets, still damp, glistened under the soft light, and the fresh morning air carried the earthy scent of wet ground and fallen leaves. Inside Nicholas Hamilton's spacious, warm apartment, a calm atmosphere seemed to linger, almost surreal. Nicholas was up early, still processing the events of the previous night. He had spent most of the night wide awake, contemplating his next steps and trying to digest what he had learned. Although he wasn't a man easily moved, the situation with Lucy and Ryan had stirred something deep within him. There was something terribly wrong with that orphanage, and he was determined to uncover the truth. He walked to the living room, where Lucy was sleeping soundly on a large, cozy couch, wrapped in a warm blanket. Nicholas looked at her small form for a moment, feeling a mix of sadness and responsibility. Ryan was in the next room, peacefully resting in a makeshift crib Nicholas had quickly put together with what he had available. Nicholas knew he couldn't waste any more time. He had to act right away. Picking up the phone, he called his friend, Commissioner Matthews, a trusted man who had served in the local police for years and knew San Diego like the back of his hand. "Matthews, good morning. I need a favor. It's urgent," Nicholas said, cutting straight to the point as soon as the commissioner answered. "Good morning, Hamilton. What's going on?" Matthews replied, always formal and to the point. "It's a complicated situation. Last night I found a young girl and her little brother on the street, completely abandoned. They're from a place called Little Angel's Home. The girl told me some disturbing things about the place. I need you to look into it discreetly." "Something isn't right there," Nicholas explained, his voice heavy with concern. There was a brief pause on the other end, and Nicholas could picture Matthews processing the information. "Little Angel's Home. I've heard of it, but we've never received any formal complaints against them. I'll start looking into this right away. But Hamilton, watch your back. If this is as Serodesis as it sounds, we might be dealing with some powerful people," warned the commissioner. "I understand, Matthews. I just want to make sure these kids are safe, and if there's anything illegal going on, it's stopped immediately," replied Nicholas, thanking his friend before ending the call. After hanging up, Nicholas felt he had taken an essential first step, though he knew this was only the beginning. He walked to the kitchen and began preparing a simple yet nourishing breakfast for Lucy and Ryan. While he worked, his thoughts drifted to the woman at the orphanage, whose cold, cruel demeanor was unsettling. Who was she? And why was she in charge of children when she clearly viewed them as a burden? Nicholas knew he wouldn't have to wait long for some answers. While still in the kitchen making toast and juice, he heard the soft sound of footsteps. Turning, he saw Lucy standing at the doorway, still wrapped in a blanket, her big, weary eyes glistening with curiosity. She seemed almost shocked to be in such a comforting space after all she had endured. "Good morning, Lucy," Nicholas greeted her warmly. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, sir," she replied shyly, still getting used to the idea that someone genuinely cared about her. "Come, have a seat. I'm making breakfast for us. Ryan's still asleep so we can take our time," Nicholas said, guiding her to the table, where he'd already placed a few plates. Lucy sat down, watching Nicholas's every move closely. To her, this all felt like a dream. No one had ever prepared a meal for her with such care before, or shown her such kindness. As she nibbled on a slice of toast, Nicholas sat down across from her, searching for the right moment to ask the questions he needed answers to. "Lucy, do you remember anything else about the orphanage?" he asked gently, not wanting to pressure her. "Any detail could be helpful." Lucy hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "There were lots of kids there, some like me, but others—" She paused, as if searching for the right words. "Others were taken away, and we never saw them again. Victoria said they had found a new home, but I never believed her." Nicholas felt a chill creep down his spine. Kids disappearing without any logical explanations. This story was taking a much darker turn than he'd anticipated. "Victoria, is that her name?" Nicholas asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yes, Mrs. Victoria. She was in charge of the orphanage. She didn't like me. She always said I was too much trouble, that Ryan cried too much." Lucy's voice began to waver, and Nicholas could tell she was reliving painful memories. A mix of anger and determination surged within him. He knew he needed to find this woman and uncover what was really going on at the children's home. But he'd have to proceed carefully. There was a real possibility this was more than just neglect. It could be something far more dangerous. As they ate in silence, the phone rang again. Nicholas stood up and walked to the living room to answer. It was Officer Matthews, and the news he brought wasn't good. "Nicholas, I asked around discreetly in town, and it seems the children's home isn't exactly what it claims to be. There are rumors that the orphanage might be involved in something darker. Child trafficking," Matthews said, his tone grave. Nicholas felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. "Child trafficking? I knew this was Sorodesis, but that goes beyond anything I could have imagined. We have to act fast, Matthews. Those kids are in danger. We need evidence to shut that place down and arrest those involved," Nicholas replied, his voice firm and resolute. "I'm with you, Hamilton, but we have to tread carefully. We can't afford a misstep. I'll gather my team and start putting together a plan." "Can you keep the kids safe for now?" asked Matthews. "Yes. I'll make sure they're secure. Let me know as soon as you have a plan." Nicholas hung up, feeling the weight of responsibility grow heavier by the second. He returned to the kitchen, where Lucy waited in silence, clearly sensing that something was wrong. Nicholas knelt down beside her, meeting her gaze with calm resolve. "Lucy, I promise I'll do everything I can to protect you and Ryan. But I need you to trust me and tell me everything you know about that orphanage." His voice was steady, filled with sincerity. "Every detail could help us save other kids too." Lucy looked back at Nicholas, her eyes revealing a mix of fear and hope. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded. "I'll tell you everything I know," she said, with renewed determination. As Nicholas listened carefully to Lucy's words, he realized he was about to face something much bigger than he'd anticipated. But he also knew he wasn't alone. With Matthew's support and Lucy's courage, he was determined to uncover the truth about what was happening at the children's home and to make sure no one else suffered at the hands of Victoria and her accomplices. The investigation was just beginning, but Nicholas was prepared to see it through, no matter what it cost. "I'll handle everything, Nicholas," assured the lawyer on the other end of the line. "Let's meet early tomorrow to discuss the details. In the meantime, make sure the kids are in a safe place." Nicholas thanked him and hung up. He knew the road ahead would be tough, but he was sure he had made the right choice. Those kids had crossed his path for a reason, and he was ready to do whatever it took to protect them. "Lucy," he said gently as she finished her meal, "tonight, you and Ryan are staying with me. I'll take care of you, and tomorrow we'll figure this all out." "Sound good?" She looked up at him, her big, frightened eyes reflecting as much hope as fear. She nodded without saying a word, but Nicholas could tell that, for the first time, she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be okay. As night settled over San Diego, the storm outside began to calm, but inside the cafe, Nicholas knew the real storm was just starting. And he was ready to face it head-on, for Lucy, for Ryan, and for all the children who might be suffering in silence in that dark orphanage. The sun was already high in the sky, though its light barely reached the narrow, rain-soaked streets of San Diego. Nicholas Hamilton sat in his living room, a blend of tension and determination stirring within him. Lucy was in the room, playing with some toys he'd picked up that morning, while Ryan slept in a makeshift crib nearby. Despite the warm comfort of his home, Nicholas knew that the real storm was only beginning. After hearing Lucy's shocking revelations about the orphanage, Little Angel's home, and the children who seemed to vanish without a trace, Nicholas spent hours figuring out his next move. He had already spoken with Commissioner Matthews, who had started a discreet investigation, but Nicholas knew he needed to gather more information before taking any concrete action. Determined to uncover more, Nicholas prepared to head out. He put on a light jacket and a hat to shield himself from the sun. Before leaving, he approached Lucy, who was focused on assembling a puzzle on the living room table. "Lucy, I need to go out for a bit, but I'll be back soon. You'll stay here with Ryan, and Mrs. Bailey will come by to help you take care of him, all right?" Nicholas said, trying to reassure her. Lucy looked up at him, and Nicholas noticed a hint of worry in her eyes. She nodded, but remained silent. Nicholas knew she was still scared, but she was beginning to trust him, and that was what mattered most. "I'll be back soon," he promised, giving her a smile before stepping out the door. Nicholas drove slowly through the streets of San Diego, his thoughts torn between concern for the children and the pressing need to understand what was really happening at the orphanage. He knew he couldn't rely on hearsay alone. He needed solid facts and evidence to support any action against Victoria and Little Angel's home. His first stop was the City Hall. Nicholas knew that to start piecing together this mystery, he needed a clearer understanding of the orphanage's background. A receptionist welcomed him when he arrived at the small, historic building that housed the public records. "Good morning, Mr. Hamilton. How can I help you today?" the receptionist asked with a friendly smile. "Good morning. I'd like to access some old records, specifically about Little Angel's home. I need information on who founded it, who currently runs it, and any recorded complaints or irregularities," Nicholas explained, keeping his tone as professional as possible. The receptionist seemed surprised by his request, but nodded right away. "Sure, I'll look up those records for you. You can wait in the reading room, and I'll bring whatever I find," she said, disappearing down a narrow hallway. Nicholas made his way to the reading room, a cozy space filled with dark wood furniture and shelves lined with books and files. He took a seat, feeling his tension rise as he waited. His thoughts kept circling back to what Lucy had told him. Missing children, Victoria, cold and cruel, and an orphanage that was meant to be a safe haven, but harbored dark secrets. After a few minutes, the receptionist returned, carrying a stack of folders and yellowed documents. She placed them on the table in front of Nicholas, who thanked her and immediately began sifting through the material. The first documents were basic records about the orphanage's founding, dated about 20 years back. The children's home had been established by a woman named Maria Velasco, a local philanthropist who, according to the records, had used her own wealth to create a home for orphaned and abandoned children. At first glance, it seemed like a genuine initiative with good intentions. However, Nicholas noticed a drastic change in recent years. As he moved on to the more recent records, he saw a significant shift in the orphanage's management. About 5 years ago, Maria Velasco had passed away under unclear circumstances, and the administration was transferred to a woman named Victoria Rhodes. That was the name Lucy had mentioned, and Nicholas felt a chill seeing it in print. Victoria Rhodes appeared to have taken full control of the orphanage following Maria Velasco's death. Not much was documented about her background, but Nicholas came across a particularly unsettling piece of information. Victoria had ties to influential figures, including local business people and politicians. Those connections might explain why, despite the rumors, no Serodesis investigation had ever been conducted against her or the orphanage. Nicholas continued combing through the documents, searching for any clue that could help. Then, something caught his attention. An orphanage employee's internal report mentioned that Victoria frequently relocated children without adhering to the required legal procedures. These relocations were frequently done without any documentation or tracking, and the children in question vanished without a trace. The report didn't offer many specifics, but it suggested that Victoria's methods were, at the very least, questionable. The employee, whose name wasn't recorded, seemed to have tried reporting these irregularities, but was fired before he could take the case further. Nicholas felt this could be a critical lead in the investigation. He needed to find out who this employee was and what else he might know. With his mind buzzing with questions and the feeling that he was just beginning to grasp the scale of the problem, Nicholas thanked the receptionist and left the town hall. He knew he had to be cautious. Victoria Rhodes wasn't an ordinary adversary. She had influence and connections that could complicate any attempt to expose her. Back in his car, Nicholas picked up his phone and called Sheriff Matthews again. "Matthews, I'm leaving the town hall now. I've come across some troubling information about the children's home and Victoria Rhodes. It appears she has powerful connections and might be involved in something much bigger." "Have you made any progress with the investigation?" Nicholas asked, feeling a growing urgency. "Hamilton, we're on it. I've received some intel from reliable sources confirming your suspicions. It seems Victoria is using the orphanage as a front for illegal activities, possibly child trafficking. But we need concrete evidence to move forward. I'm putting together a team to conduct a deeper investigation, but we need to be discreet. Victoria has eyes and ears everywhere," Matthews replied, his voice Serodesis. "Understood, Matthews. I'll keep digging on my end. Keep me updated on any new developments," Nicholas said, ending the call. He knew time was running out. Victoria Rhodes and her network of accomplices could be just a step away from covering their tracks, and Nicholas needed to act quickly. But he also knew he couldn't rush in recklessly. He needed to be smart, meticulous, and above all, cautious to protect Lucy, Ryan, and any other children who might be at risk. Nicholas drove back home, his mind racing with the new information. He felt more determined than ever to unmask Victoria and expose the illegal activities taking place at the children's home. But to do this, Nicholas would need every bit of evidence and allies he could trust. As he parked the car and headed back up to his apartment, he knew that every move from here on had to be carefully calculated. He was on the verge of stepping into a dark, dangerous world, but he had no other choice. The lives of Lucy, Ryan, and countless other children were at stake, and he wouldn't rest until the truth was uncovered. The midday sun was bright over San Diego when Nicholas Hamilton returned to his apartment, feeling the weight of his discoveries about the children's home. The gentle sound of laughter coming from the living room greeted him as he opened his door. Lucy was playing with some toys, watched over by Mrs. Bailey, the same woman from the cafe who had helped him the night before, with a warm, caring smile. "Good morning, Mr. Hamilton," Mrs. Bailey greeted him, standing up as he entered. "I hope you managed to sort out whatever you needed. The children are doing well." Nicholas smiled, feeling a brief wave of relief, seeing that Lucy and Ryan were in safe hands. But that relief quickly faded into worry. He knew he needed to act swiftly and discreetly, now that he was more aware of what was really happening. "Thank you, Mrs. Bailey. I truly appreciate your help." "I need to discuss something with you if you have a moment," Nicholas said, his voice carrying the weight of the situation. Mrs. Bailey sensed the urgency in his tone and gestured for Lucy to keep playing as she moved closer to Nicholas. "Of course, Mr. Hamilton." "What happened?" she asked, concern deepening her expression. Nicholas led her to the kitchen, a spot out of earshot from the kids. "Bailey, I've uncovered some troubling things about the orphanage where Lucy and Ryan were staying. It seems that the woman in charge, Victoria Rhodes, is involved in illegal activities. I don't have all the details, yet, but there are signs she's using the orphanage as a front for child trafficking." Nicholas paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. Bailey clasped her hand over her mouth, shocked by what she'd just heard. "My God, I can't believe something like this is happening here in our town." "Nicholas, what are you going to do?" she asked, visibly shaken. "I need your help, Bailey. Chief Matthews is looking into the case, but we have to be extremely careful. We don't know who might be involved, and we need solid proof before we make any moves. In the meantime, I have to make sure Lucy and Ryan are safe. Would you be willing to help look after them until this situation is resolved?" Nicholas asked, meeting her eyes. Despite her initial shock, Bailey nodded firmly. "Of course, Nicholas. I'll do whatever I can to help these kids. They can't go back to that place." Bailey placed a reassuring hand on Nicholas's shoulder, solidifying her promise. "Thank you, Bailey. You have no idea how much this means to me," Nicholas said, feeling temporary relief. As Bailey headed back to join the children in the living room, Nicholas moved to his home office. He needed to gather his thoughts and plan his next steps. Seated at his desk, he began sorting through documents he'd obtained from the city records office, searching for any useful clues. As he scanned the files, an idea started to form in his mind. He knew Victoria Rhodes would be the key to everything, and if he could gather more information on her connections and dealings, he could build a strong case against her. But for that, he'd need someone who knew the ins and outs of the children's home. Nicholas recalled a report that mentioned a former employee who had attempted to expose Victoria's suspicious activities before being dismissed. That person might just be the ally he needed. Determined to track them down, Nicholas picked up the phone and called Chief Matthews. "Matthews, I was reviewing some documents from city records, and it appears there was an employee at the children's home who tried to report Victoria before he was let go. This person could be a key part of our investigation. Can you find out who it was and where they are now?" Nicholas asked, already mentally preparing for the next step. On the other end of the line, Matthews was clearly committed to the investigation. His voice was filled with resolve. "I'm already on it, Hamilton. I'll reach out to some connections and track this person down. It might take a while, but I'll do everything I can to locate that employee. In the meantime, stay alert. I got word that Victoria is starting to suspect someone's looking into the orphanage. She might try to cover everything up if she realizes we're getting too close, warned the commissioner. Nicholas felt a chill at those words. He knew time was slipping away, and any wrong move could risk everything. Understood, Matthews. Keep me updated as soon as you find anything, Nicholas replied, ending the call. He knew patience was necessary, but the urgency of the situation gnawed at him. He decided he couldn't just sit back and wait. He needed to keep investigating, hunting for more clues, and preparing for whatever lay ahead. The rest of the day he spent on the phone, gathering as much information as he could about Victoria and her activities. Nicholas realized he would need more allies, beyond just Matthews, people willing to stand up to Victoria and the forces protecting her. By late afternoon, as the sun began setting and a golden light poured through the windows, Nicholas went to the living room to check on the kids. Ryan was still asleep, and Lucy sat beside Bailey, gazing out the window. "How are you holding up, Lucy?" Nicholas asked, sitting beside her on the couch. "I'm okay, sir," she answered, "but I'm a little scared. Victoria won't find us, will she?" Her eyes held a mix of fear and hope. Nicholas placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, trying to reassure her. "Don't worry, Lucy. I promise you and Ryan are safe here. And I'll make sure no one else has to go through what you both endured," Nicholas said firmly. Lucy nodded, attempting to trust his words, though fear of Victoria still lingered deeply within her. As night settled over San Diego, Nicholas felt he was inching closer to a dark web of secrets and corruption. He knew the coming days would be crucial, and every choice he made could have far-reaching consequences, not just for himself, but for Lucy, Ryan, and countless other children who might be in danger. Nicholas looked out the window, watching as the city lights began to sparkle against the darkening sky. He knew that what lay ahead would demand more than just courage. It would require sharp thinking, patience, and the ability to trust the allies he had gathered over the years. Above all, he would need the strength not to give up, even when the path ahead appeared dark and uncertain. The quiet night draped San Diego in a veil of darkness, broken only by the soft glow of streetlights and the scattered stars above. Inside Nicholas Hamilton's apartment, a tense calm filled the air. Sitting in his study, Nicholas reviewed the information he had gathered so far. Each piece of data, every small detail, seemed to draw him closer to the grim truth he suspected lay hidden within the orphanage, the little angel's home. As he read through old reports and his notes from the day, Nicholas's phone rang, breaking the silence. He answered quickly, recognizing the number. Commissioner Matthews. "Matthews, what have you found?" Nicholas asked, his voice low but brimming with anticipation. The morning sun struggled to pierce through the grey clouds hanging over San Diego, as if nature itself sensed the rising tension enveloping the city. Yet Nicholas Hamilton was more focused than ever. After Jeffrey's revelations the night before, he knew time was slipping away. Victoria Rhodes was a dangerous woman, with powerful allies and a network of corruption seemingly woven into every corner of San Diego. Every move now had to be carefully calculated. Nicholas had spent the night going over his notes and discussing strategies with Commissioner Matthews, determined to dismantle the child trafficking ring operating under the guise of the orphanage. The scale of the operation was daunting, but Nicholas knew he couldn't let fear hold him back. He was committed to protecting Diana, Ryan, and every other child at risk. For that, he needed to act with precision and resolve. At 7 o'clock, Nicholas prepared to leave. He slipped on a plain shirt and a dark jacket, aiming to keep a low profile. Before heading out, he paused in the living room, where Lucy and Ryan still slept, wrapped in soft blankets. Lucy's face, peaceful in a deep sleep, was a stark contrast to the worried look she wore during the day. Nicholas felt a pang of sadness, thinking about everything this young girl had already faced. In the kitchen, Miss Bailey, ever careful, was preparing breakfast. The scent of fresh coffee and toasted bread filled the air, adding a brief sense of comfort and normalcy. "Good morning, Bailey," Nicholas greeted as he entered the kitchen. "Good morning, Nicholas. You're up early. Has something new happened?" Bailey asked, her voice edged with concern. Nicholas hesitated for a moment. He knew Bailey deserved to be informed, but he didn't want to overwhelm her with the sea-road-ness of the situation. He chose his words carefully. "Things are moving fast, Bailey. Jeffrey, the worker from the orphanage, got in touch with me, and it seems Victoria might be aware that he's helping us. That puts us all in danger, and I need to make sure Jeffrey stays safe before we move forward," Nicholas explained, keeping his tone steady despite his worry. Bailey frowned, visibly anxious. "This is dangerous, Nicholas. I'm afraid of what she might do if she finds out what you're trying to accomplish. But I know you're doing this for the kids, and that gives me the strength to help however I can." "What can I do today?" she asked, determined to do her part. Nicholas gave a fleeting smile in appreciation of Bailey's willingness to assist, despite the risks. "I need you to stay here and keep an eye on the kids. They shouldn't sense that anything is wrong. If you notice anything unusual, call me right away. I'll do my best to make sure everything goes smoothly today, but we can't afford any mistakes," Nicholas said, before taking a quick sip of his coffee. Bailey nodded, fully grasping the seriousness of the situation. She knew the children needed to be kept safe, and no matter how challenging it was, she was ready to do whatever it took. After saying goodbye, Nicholas left the house and headed to the police station to meet with Matthews. The drive over felt longer than usual, every minute weighing heavily on his mind. Nicholas couldn't shake the thought of the lives at stake. Jeffrey was risking everything by cooperating, and Nicholas knew he couldn't let him down, or the children still trapped in the shelter. When he arrived at the station, Matthews greeted him right away, looking as worn out as Nicholas felt, but equally resolute. The dark circles under the chief's eyes betrayed a sleepless night, yet his gaze was unwavering, reflecting a man devoted to justice. "Hamilton, I've been waiting for you. Things are heating up," Matthews said, gesturing for Nicholas to follow him to the meeting room. The room was dimly lit, with only a single yellowish lamp, casting long shadows on the concrete walls. Around the table sat some of Matthews's most trusted officers, men and women he knew were free from Victoria's influence, and those of her allies. Nicholas recognized a few familiar faces, colleagues from previous smaller cases, and felt a small sense of relief knowing they were on his side. "This is Nicholas Hamilton, our lead informant on this operation," Matthews introduced him to the team. "Hamilton, what have you got for us?" Nicholas laid out his notes on the table and started detailing everything he and Jeffrey had uncovered. He explained how Victoria had been manipulating the orphanage's records, the suspicious financial transactions, the fraudulent adoptions, and most disturbingly, her direct involvement in child trafficking. As Nicholas spoke, the officers' expressions grew more grave. They knew they were dealing with something audacious, but the extent of the operation was even more alarming than expected. "We need concrete evidence to bring Victoria and her associates down. We know she's been forging documents, but we have to catch her in the act. And we need to find those children who could still be in danger. Jeffrey has given us a few hints on possible locations, but the information is sparse," Nicholas concluded, looking to Matthews for affirmation. Matthews nodded, absorbing the information and already beginning to shape a plan in his mind. "All right, Hamilton, here's what we're going to do. We'll split our team. Part of our crew will focus on gathering more solid documentation, while the other half keeps a close eye on the kid's house," Matthews said, his tone resolute. "We need to catch Victoria in the act. I'll also assign a few guys to look into the fruit shipments Jeffrey mentioned. We have to find those kids before they disappear completely. As Matthews began coordinating tasks among the officers, Nicholas felt a small sense of relief. Finally, they were moving in the right direction. But he knew the path ahead was dangerous, full of potential pitfalls. Jeffrey's words from the night before echoed in his mind. Victoria is dangerous. She has powerful connections. This meant any misstep could come with Sirodesis consequences. With the plan laid out, Matthews turned to Nicholas, his voice firm. Hamilton, understand this. This operation is high risk. Victoria has eyes and ears everywhere, so we have to be extremely cautious. We'll monitor the kids' house closely for the next 48 hours. If we spot any suspicious movement or attempt to transport the children, we'll act immediately. And, in the meantime, we'll tighten security around Jeffrey to make sure Victoria doesn't get to him. Nicholas nodded, knowing they were treading a fine line between justice and imminent danger. A single mistake could be fatal, but turning back wasn't an option. Thanks, Matthews. I trust you and the team. We're going to bring her down, and when we do, we'll make sure she never gets a chance to harm another child again, Nicholas replied, feeling his resolve solidify. With clear orders and a solid plan in place, Nicholas left the station and headed back to his car. The weight on his shoulders was heavy, but he knew he needed to stay calm and focused. Before heading home, he decided to make one more stop. He took the quieter streets until he reached a modest building in the city center, a small but reputable law office. He'd contacted Justin Sherman, an old family friend and a lawyer known for his integrity and willingness to stand up to the powerful. If he wanted to ensure justice was truly served, he'd need legal support from someone like Justin. Nicholas received a warm welcome from the receptionist, who immediately led him to Justin's office. The attorney, a middle-aged man with graying hair and sharp eyes, rose to greet him. "Nicholas, good to see you, though I imagine these aren't the best circumstances," Justin said, gesturing for Nicholas to take a seat. "You're right about that, Justin. I'm tangled up in something big and dangerous. I'm digging into a child trafficking ring, operating under the guise of an orphanage, and things are heating up," Nicholas said, cutting straight to the point. "I need your legal support to make sure that when we finally bring this operation down, everything is handled by the book. We can't afford any loopholes," he explained. Justin listened intently, his eyes narrowing as he absorbed the gravity of the situation. "This is serious, Nicholas. Child trafficking is one of the darkest things out there, and if these people are as powerful as you say, we'll have to tread very carefully." "But you can count on me," Justin assured him, his tone carrying a steady confidence. "I'll make sure that when the time comes, every legal angle is covered. We can't let these people escape justice on a technicality." Nicholas felt a moment of relief, knowing he could rely on Justin. Legal backing was essential to the entire operation, and having someone skilled and trustworthy on board was reassuring. "Thank you, Justin. This means a lot to me. I have to go now, but I'll be in touch as soon as we have something concrete." "Let's do this the right way," Nicholas said, standing and shaking the lawyer's hand. "I'll be waiting for your call, Nicholas. And be careful. The people you're up against won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to protect themselves," Justin warned, meeting his gaze before they parted ways. As Nicholas left Justin's office and headed to his car, he felt the weight of responsibility grow with each step. He was involved in something far larger than he'd anticipated that night. He stumbled upon Lucy and Ryan in the rain. Now, he was racing against time, with lives on the line and enemies who would stop at nothing to protect their interests. While driving home, Nicholas received an unexpected call. Jeffrey's voice was thick with tension. "Hamilton, I think someone's following me. I'm scared that Victoria might know what we're up to. I need to get out of here now," he said, urgency clear in his tone. Nicholas's heart raced. If Jeffrey was right, It meant Victoria was a step ahead, and their window to act was shrinking faster than he had anticipated. "Jeffrey, stay calm. I'll send a team to pick you up. Don't take any unnecessary risks. Just head to the safe place we talked about, and I'll make sure you get there in one piece," Nicholas replied, his voice steady, even as worry grew in his mind. "All right, I'm heading out now. But Hamilton, please, be careful. If Victoria knows about me, she might also be tracking your moves," Jeffrey said, before ending the call. Immediately, Nicholas dialed Matthews to fill him in. "Matthews, there's a chance Victoria knows what we're up to. We need to move quickly to keep Jeffrey safe. Dispatch a team to get him and ensure he stays protected. And keep our movements as discreet as possible. We can't let her catch wind of how close we are," Nicholas said, his voice tight with tension. "If you're listening to this and are excited about this story, let us know by writing French fries in the comments. Now, let's continue." Matthews replied without hesitation. "I'm sending a team right now. But Hamilton, you need to watch yourself too. If Victoria really knows about Jeffrey, she might be monitoring everything we do." "Things are getting more dangerous," Matthews warned, before ending the call. Nicholas knew things were escalating quickly. Every step had to be planned carefully, and any mistake could be fatal. The air in San Diego felt heavier, as if the whole city was bracing for an impending storm, and Nicholas felt like he was in the eye of the hurricane. As he drove home, his mind raced. He knew he had to protect Jeffrey, secure the children's safety, and at the same time, gather enough evidence to bring Victoria down. Without alerting his enemies, Nicholas knew their entire network was close to collapse. When he arrived home, Mrs. Bailey greeted him, her face etched with concern. "Nicholas, what's going on? You seem more tense than usual. Did something go wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. Nicholas hesitated, debating whether to share the latest twist with her. In the end, he decided that honesty was best. "There's a chance Victoria knows what we're up to, Bailey. That means we're all at risk, especially Jeffrey. He's in danger, and I need to make sure he's safe before I go any further. But I need you to keep an eye on the kids and keep everything as normal as possible. I don't want anyone suspecting something's wrong," Nicholas said, attempting to stay calm. Bailey nodded, though fear was evident in her expression. "I understand, Nicholas. I'll do my best to keep things calm here. But please be careful. Those children need you," she replied, her voice warm with maternal concern. Nicholas managed a quick smile before retreating to his office. He needed a moment to gather his thoughts and map out the next steps. As he sat in his chair, his mind drifted back to Jeffrey's words. "If Victoria knows about me, she might know about you too." The thought gnawed at Nicholas. He knew he was dealing with people who had no morals, but there was no turning back now. He was determined to protect Lucy, Ryan, and all the others who were in danger. As night closed in, Nicholas continued planning, weighing each move carefully. He knew he was racing against time, and each decision could be the difference between success and failure. That night, the darkness in San Diego felt even thicker. Nicholas could sense that something was about to happen, something that would change the investigation and perhaps his life forever. But he was ready. Whatever came his way, he was prepared to confront Victoria and dismantle her network of corruption for good. "Hamilton, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is we tracked down the former orphanage employee you mentioned. His name is Jeffrey Sanders. He worked at the children's home for 3 years, but was abruptly dismissed shortly after attempting to report Victoria. It seemed he had uncovered too much. The troubling part was that Jeffrey was now too afraid to speak. Victoria has powerful connections, and he fears for his life if he gets involved again," explained Matthews, with a seriousness that didn't go unnoticed by Nicholas. Nicholas stayed silent for a moment, processing the information. Jeffrey Sanders might hold the key to unraveling the mysteries of the orphanage, but convincing him to talk would be a challenge if he was this terrified. "Where is he now, Matthews? I need to talk to him in person." "Maybe I can convince him it's worth the risk," Nicholas said, resolute. "He's hiding out in a small village on the outskirts of San Diego. I won't lie to you, Hamilton. He's pretty shaken up, but you might be able to earn his trust. I'll send you the address." "Be careful," Matthews replied before hanging up. As soon as he got the message with the address, Nicholas felt a mix of urgency and caution. He knew he had to move fast, but he also couldn't risk scaring Jeffrey further. This man might be the missing piece needed to expose Victoria and bring down the network she seemed to be building within the orphanage. Nicholas decided not to waste any time. He put on a light jacket and slipped out of his apartment quietly. Mrs. Bailey, who was watching over the children, noticed him leaving and approached him. "You're heading out again, Nicholas. The kids are fine, but they seem calmer when you're around," she said with a hint of worry. "I know, Bailey, but I need to find someone who can help us sort all of this out. I won't be long. Please keep taking care of them." "If you need anything, call me," Nicholas replied, trying to reassure her before heading out the door. The night was chilly, and the air held a fresh scent of damp earth. Nicholas got into his car and navigated through the dim streets, heading toward the village where Jeffrey was hiding. The road wound tightly as he left the center of San Diego, with the city lights fading behind him, giving way to an almost complete darkness. After about 30 minutes, Nicholas reached the village Matthews had described. It was a small cluster of rustic houses, most of them adobe with clay roofs, lined along a dirt path. Nicholas parked the car and stepped out, glancing at the few remaining lights still on in the neighborhood homes. He double-checked the address and made his way to a modest house, set a little back from the others. He knocked on the door, which was slightly ajar, and waited. For a moment, there was no response. Then, the sound of cautious footsteps approached. The door opened just enough for him to see an older man with a face lined with deep wrinkles and a wary gaze. "Jeffrey Sanders, I'm Nicholas Hamilton. Commissioner Matthews told me where to find you." "I need to talk to you," Nicholas said, keeping his voice calm and low. Jeffrey looked at Nicholas with a mix of fear and uncertainty. He hesitated before opening the door a bit wider, allowing Nicholas a glimpse of the sparsely furnished interroads. "Matthews said you'd be coming. Come in, but keep your voice down. I can't risk anyone overhearing us," Jeffrey said, his voice trembling slightly as he stepped back to let Nicholas enter. The house was simple, with minimal furniture and dim lighting. Jeffrey led Nicholas to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. He gestured for Nicholas to sit, then took a seat himself, visibly tense. "What do you want from me, Hamilton?" Jeffrey asked bluntly. Nicholas knew he had to be straightforward. He could see Jeffrey was scared, but he also understood that the only way to get the information he needed was by showing Jeffrey he could be trusted. "Jeffrey, I know you tried to report Victoria and what was happening at the children's home. And I know that, because of that, you lost your job and had to go into hiding. But I'm here to tell you, you're not alone. Commissioner Matthews and I are investigating Victoria. We need your help to expose her and make sure no one else suffers under her watch," Nicholas explained, speaking in a tone that aimed to reassure him. Jeffrey lowered his gaze, running his hands over his face, as if trying to push away painful memories. "You don't understand what you're asking. Victoria is dangerous, Hamilton. She has powerful connections. When I started realizing what was really happening at the orphanage, I tried to report it, but no one wanted to listen. They said I was making things up. Then they fired me. They threatened me, saying if I didn't disappear, something awful would happen to me. That's why I'm here hiding, Geoffrey said, his voice filled with bitterness and fear. Nicholas leaned forward, trying to connect with Geoffrey, both physically and emotionally. Geoffrey, I understand your fear, but think about the kids still there, the ones who might vanish without a trace. If we don't stop Victoria, how many more will suffer? I promise I'll do everything I can to protect you, but we need your help. You know more than anyone what's happening in that children's home. We need you to reveal the truth, Nicholas urged, his voice heavy with urgency. Geoffrey fell silent for a long moment as if battling his own inner demons. Finally he sighed and looked at Nicholas with a mix of resignation and determination. Victoria is involved in child trafficking. I saw the transactions, I saw them taking the kids away. I never knew where they went, but I knew it wasn't good. She made it all look legal, like it was adoption, but the paperwork was fake and the kids simply vanished. I tried going to the authorities, but she has people everywhere. And now you tell me Matthews has been arrested. That gives me a little hope. I'll help you, Hamilton. But we have to be careful, Geoffrey said, finally accepting the need to act. Nicholas felt a wave of relief, though he knew the danger was escalating. They were stepping into something big, something that could put everyone at risk. Thank you, Geoffrey. I know it's tough, but together we can make a difference. I need you to tell me everything you know, every detail. We'll build a solid case and bring Victoria down once and for all, Nicholas said, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. Geoffrey nodded and began to recount all he knew. He described how Victoria manipulated orphanage records, forged adoption papers, and took the children, often at night, to unknown destinations. He talked about suspicious financial transactions and how employees who asked too many questions were silenced. As Geoffrey spoke, Nicholas took notes, each detail revealing the magnitude of Victoria's network. He knew this information could be the key to dismantling the entire scheme, but he also understood they were now in a dangerous game where any mistake could be fatal. After hours of talking, Geoffrey finally stopped, exhausted but relieved to have shared the truth. That's everything. It's all I know. I hope it's enough to take Victoria down. But please, Hamilton, be careful. These people have no limits, Geoffrey said, his eyes weary but determined. Nicholas placed a hand on Geoffrey's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. Thank you, Geoffrey. This is more than enough. I promise we'll use this information to end it once and for all. And I'll make sure you're safe throughout the whole process, Nicholas replied, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing harder on him. As he left Geoffrey's house and returned to his car, Nicholas knew he was stepping into something massive. The intel he'd just received could be the key to taking down Victoria and ending the child trafficking ring. But it also meant the stakes were higher than ever. He'd have to be meticulous, ensuring each move was made with precision. As he drove back to San Diego, the darkness of the night felt even deeper. But Nicholas felt a burning resolve in his chest. He was closer to the truth than ever before, and he knew he couldn't stop now. The lives of countless children depended on it. The night in San Diego brought a haunting stillness. The streets, usually alive with the town's nighttime energy, were eerily empty, as if the city itself held its breath. Only the gentle sound of the wind outside and Lucy's occasional murmurs, who may have been dreaming of a better world far away from the horrors she had already witnessed, broke the silence inside Nicholas Hamilton's apartment. Nicholas, however, couldn't sleep. His laptop, files and notes were all around him as he sat at the living room table, watching the screen of his laptop flicker with each new message. He was at the center of a complex web of information, alliances and dangers that pressed in on him from every side. With each passing minute, the weight of responsibility grew heavier. He knew he was about to enter the most pivotal moment of this entire journey. and the uncertainty of what lay ahead kept him on edge. Mrs. Bailey, always watchful, had insisted on staying overnight at Nicholas's house to help care for the kids and ensure they were shielded from the gravity of the situation. She understood that while Nicholas might be caught in the storm, Lucy and Ryan needed stability and safety, even if it was just a comforting illusion. Nicholas, glancing at the peacefully sleeping children, felt a blend of love and fear. The love he held for them, especially for Lucy, who had slowly become like a daughter to him, and the fear of not being able to protect them weighed on his mind. He realized that once he took the next step, there would be no turning back. Victoria Rhodes would be a dangerous and cunning enemy, and now that she likely knew she was under investigation, she'd become even more unpredictable and deadly. Nicholas's phone buzzed, breaking his thoughts. He looked down to see a text from Commissioner Matthews. Heart pounding, Nicholas read the message. Team deployed to pick up Jeffrey. He's safe. Monitoring activity at the children's home. Suspicious movements noted. We need to act soon. Nicholas read the message several times, each word fueling his determination. The time to act was near. Victoria was making her move, and that meant they needed to act quickly to prevent her from fleeing or worse, harming more children under her care. Knowing there was no time to waste, Nicholas got ready for what lay ahead. He began reviewing the information he had gathered so far, making sure everything was in place, before meeting up with Matthews and his team for what would be the final strike against Victoria. He opened a file on his laptop that contained detailed notes based on Jeffrey's insights. The employee from the children's home had provided crucial details about the inner workings of the orphanage, exposing the illicit operations happening behind closed doors. Nicholas focused on the transport routes Jeffrey had mentioned. According to him, Victoria used hidden paths through remote villages and rural roads to move the children undetected. These routes were carefully chosen to avoid police patrols and prying eyes, making it nearly impossible to track the kids. While poring over the specifics, Nicholas felt his urgency intensify. He realized they needed to intercept these routes to rescue the children before they were moved again, possibly out of the country. He also understood that to dismantle the entire operation, they had to catch Victoria red-handed, something only achievable if they acted with pinpoint precision. As he mentally prepared himself, Nicholas heard a gentle knock on his office door. It was Bailey, her expression Siridace's yet kind. "Nicholas, may I come in?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "Of course, Bailey, please come in," Nicholas replied, setting aside his documents to give her his attention. Bailey entered, quietly closing the door behind her to avoid waking the children. She approached his desk, her eyes revealing a concern she hadn't voiced before. "I know you're about to do something very dangerous, Nicholas. I don't need details, but I can see it in your eyes. I just want you to know that we're all with you. The children, we need you to come back safely," said Bailey, her voice trembling slightly at the end. Hearing her words, Nicholas was overwhelmed with emotion. He knew his upcoming mission was risky, but he also knew he couldn't fail. Victoria had to be stopped, and he was ready to do whatever it took. "Thank you, Bailey. That means a lot to me. I'll do everything possible to ensure everyone is safe. I won't let Victoria get away unpunished, but I need you to keep looking after Lucy and Ryan while I'm away. I trust you, and that gives me peace to do what I must do," said Nicholas, placing his hand over hers in gratitude. Bailey nodded, squeezing Nicholas's hand in response. "I promise I'll take care of them as if they were my own. But please, Nicholas, come back home. Those kids need you." "And we do too," she said, before quietly stepping out, leaving Nicholas alone once more. Nicholas sat in silence for a few minutes, reflecting on everything that had happened up to this point. He recalled the night he first found Lucy and Ryan, and how that impulsive, decision to stop his car and help had completely changed his life. Now, he was at the center of a battle between good and evil, and he knew he couldn't lose. Determined to do whatever it took, Nicholas picked up the phone and called Matthews. "Matthews, I'm ready. I'm heading to the station now. We need to meet and coordinate our next move. Victoria's is on the move, and we need to act before it's too late," Nicholas said, his voice steady and resolved. "I agree, Hamilton. I'll gather the team and get everything in place. We're ready for anything." "Victoria won't go down without a fight," Matthews responded before hanging up. Nicholas took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. He knew it would be a long night, and the outcome of this operation could decide the fate of many lives, including his own. Before leaving, he went to the room where Lucy and Ryan were sleeping. He knelt beside Lucy's bed, watching her innocent face softened by sleep. A wave of emotion washed over him as he thought about how this young girl had impacted his life in such a short time. He leaned down, kissed her gently on the forehead, and murmured to himself, "I'm doing this for you, Lucy. I'll make sure you have the life you deserve." With a heavy but determined heart, Nicholas left the house and got into his car, driving toward the station. The city felt strangely calm, but Nicholas knew that this peace was just the calm before the storm about to break. When he arrived at the station, he was led straight to the meeting room, where Matthews and his team were already waiting. The atmosphere in the room was tense, but filled with determination. Everyone knew this was the most critical operation of their careers. Matthews stood in front of a board covered with notes, maps, and photos. He had mapped out the plan meticulously, considering every possible variable and contingency. "Hamilton, glad you made it. We're ready to move. Here's the plan," Matthews said, pointing to the board. Nicholas stepped closer, studying every detail. The plan was divided into 3 main phases. First, interception. The team would split into 2 groups. One group would station along the transport routes identified by Jeffrey, with the goal of intercepting any suspicious movement. He would stay in constant communication with the second group, tasked with monitoring the children's home and waiting for the right moment to act. Second, the raid and rescue. As soon as any suspicious movement was detected, or when there was sufficient evidence, the team would storm the orphanage to rescue the children and arrest Victoria and her accomplices. Their top priority was the safety of the children, ensuring that none would be harmed during the operation. Third, evidence collection and arrest. After the raid, the team would focus on gathering all necessary evidence to make sure Victoria and her network would be prosecuted. This would include seizing documents, electronic devices, and any other relevant material. "Hamilton, I need you to coordinate the evidence collection phase. You have the experience to make sure we miss nothing. Every detail could be vital to permanently dismantling Victoria's network," said Matthews, as Nicholas nodded. "Understood, Matthews. I'll make sure nothing is left unchecked. We need to do this the right way," Nicholas replied, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The team was ready. Everyone knew their roles and was prepared for anything. Matthews, with one last glance at the board, turned to the officers and to Nicholas. "This is our chance to end this operation and save these kids. There won't be a second shot. We need to act with precision and speed." "Good luck, everyone," said Matthews. The operation started as he left the room, Nicholas and the other officers following suit. Nicholas knew he was heading into dangerous territory, but there was no room for fear or hesitation. The lives of innocent children were on the line, and he was determined to make sure they were rescued and that those responsible would be brought to justice. As the police cars and unmarked vehicles began moving through the darkened city streets, Nicholas felt the tension in the air. He knew he was in the eye of a silent storm, one that could erupt at any moment. But he was also certain that he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. While driving toward the designated location to oversee the gathering of evidence, Nicholas mentally reviewed each detail of the plan, carefully going over every step he'd need to take to ensure everything went smoothly. He knew the night ahead would be long and dangerous, but he also knew it was a chance to make a real difference, to save lives, and finally, to take down the web of corruption that had poisoned Miguel de Allende. Time crawled by as the team took up their positions, each member silently bracing for what lay ahead. The tension was palpable, and everyone knew they were on the edge of action. Sitting in his car, Nicholas watched the quiet, deserted streets, waiting for the signal. Once the call came, he understood there would be no turning back. Suddenly, his radio crackled, and Matthews's voice came through, steady and clear. "All points in position. Suspicious movements confirmed. Get ready to move." Nicholas took a deep breath, feeling the surge of adrenaline gripping his body. He knew he was at his limit, but he was prepared. All agents were now in place. "Let's go get her," Nicholas responded, his voice filled with the resolve he felt. The operation was about to begin, and he knew the events of the next few hours would shape the future for many. He was about to come face to face with Victoria Rhodes, and he was ready to fight to the end to see that justice was served. Night had fully settled over San Diego, cloaking the city in a tense, heavy silence. The sky was clear, but without stars, as if nature itself had decided to hide away from the approaching conflict. Nicholas Hamilton sat in one of the unmarked police cars, parked a few blocks from the children's home, alongside Matthews and other team members. Everyone was on edge, prepared for an operation that could alter their lives forever. Over the radio, a low, tense voice from one of the officers stationed around the orphanage confirmed movement on the east side of the building. 2 vehicles approaching looked like vans, awaiting instructions. Nicholas shared a quick glance with Matthews, who was tense but focused. The information confirmed the suspicions Jeffrey had shared, setting the stage for what was to come. The vans were likely stationed there to transport the children away before anyone could discover them. This would be the perfect time to act, intercepting the vehicles while also moving into the orphanage. Matthews picked up his radio, responding with command. "All units get ready for action. Alpha Team, intercept the vehicles. Bravo Team, be prepared to breach the orphanage as soon as the situation is under control. We must prioritize the children's safety above everything else." Nicholas, heart pounding, mentally reviewed the plan. He'd prepared for this moment, but the reality of stepping into action, with so many children's lives hinging on the success of this operation, felt overwhelming. He knew every second mattered. As they waited, time seemed to stretch. Every crackle of the radio, every tick of the second hand was a reminder that they were on the edge of something monumental. Then, finally, it was time. "Alpha Team, moving in. Intercepting now," reported a voice over the radio. Nicholas and Matthews looked through the windshield and saw in the distance the vans suddenly surrounded by police vehicles. The intercept team acted quickly and efficiently, blocking every possible escape route. Tension was at its peak. "Bravo Team, it's go time. Breach the orphanage. I repeat, breach the orphanage," Matthews commanded as Nicholas stepped out of the car following the team. The assault team, made up of trained and armed officers, moved toward the orphanage quietly, but with fierce determination. Nicholas, although not a police officer, had insisted on being there. He felt compelled to see with his own eyes what was happening inside that dark, eerie place. As they neared the orphanage, Nicholas could make out the building's Dieter Rhodes-ated facade. The place, which should have been a sanctuary for homeless children, exuded an aura of neglect and darkness. Some windows were boarded up, and the once vibrant walls were faded and covered in grime. It was hard to believe that children could live in such a place. The officers took up positions around the main entrance, while others circled the building to prevent anyone from slipping away. Nicholas felt a chill of nervous sweat in his palms as he waited for the signal to go in. Matthews raised his hand, giving a firm gesture to proceed. The front door suddenly creaked open, and then a series of quick, precisely timed commands echoed through the night. The officers poured into the building, weapons raised, prepared for any resistance. Nicholas followed closely behind, his heart pounding so hard he could almost hear it in his ears. Inside the orphanage, the stench of mold and dampness was overpowering, and the dim lighting cast unsettling shadows along the walls. The tension in the air was palpable, a mix of dread and resolve. The team moved swiftly through the dark corridors, searching each room as they advanced. "Room to the right, clear, no sign of children here," one officer called out as he checked a room on the first floor. Nicholas's anxiety grew. Where were the children? What had Victoria done with them? He knew that if they didn't act fast, they might lose the chance to save them. Just then, they heard hurried footsteps coming from the floor above. Nicholas and Matthews exchanged a glance and quickly headed up the stairs toward the sound. The old wooden steps creaked under their feet, adding to the tension. When they reached the second floor, they noticed a door at the end of the hallway, slightly ajar. A faint light seeped through the gap, casting a narrow glow on the dark floor. Nicholas signaled for the officers to approach with caution. Matthews reached the door first. He motioned for Nicholas and the others to prepare, and with a swift push, he opened the door, stepping into the room with his weapon raised. Nicholas followed right behind him, and what he saw left him speechless. The room was large, with windows covered by thick curtains that blocked any view from outside. In the middle, several small beds were lined up, one after another. Scattered on these beds were children of Varhodesus ages, all wearing plain, worn-out clothes. Some were sound asleep, while others were wide awake, eyes filled with fear as they watched the armed men enter. Victoria shouted, her voice echoing in the quiet room. "Matthews, you have no place left to hide." For a moment, nothing happened. Silence filled the room, with only the labored breathing of the children breaking the stillness. Then, from behind a bookshelf in the corner, a figure slowly emerged. It was Victoria Rhodes. Nicholas had heard countless descriptions of this woman, but even so she was different from what he'd pictured. She was tall and slender, her grey hair tightly pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple yet stylish dress that sharply contrasted with the dilapidated surroundings. Her eyes, though, were cold and calculating, devoid of any sign of regret or fear. "So you finally found me," Victoria said, her voice calm, as if she'd been expecting this all along. "But you're making a mistake." Matthews kept his gun aimed at her, his gaze steady. "The only mistake here is the one you made, Victoria. Running an orphanage as a cover for child trafficking. Did you think you'd get away with it?" Matthews replied, his stance unwavering. Victoria took a step forward, her eyes shifting from Matthews to Nicholas, who looked at her with a mix of anger and disgust. "I know what you think of me, Mr. Hamilton. But let me tell you something," she continued. "The world's a harsh place, and I'm simply playing the game we're all forced into. These children," she gestured vaguely toward the beds surrounding her, "had no future. She claimed she'd given them a chance to survive. And you, as a businessman, should understand that sometimes, to save a few, others have to be sacrificed." If you are listening to this story with someone, comment candy, and if you are alone, leave cotton candy in the comment below. Don't feel lonely. We are always with you, so let's continue listening to the story. Nicholas felt a chill run down his spine. The way Victoria spoke of the children, as if they were disposable assets, made him sick. He took a determined step forward, his gaze hard and resolute. "Sacrificing innocent lives isn't a game, Victoria. You're no savior. You're a trafficker, a criminal. And today that ends," Nicholas said, his voice charged with emotion. Victoria smiled faintly, though her eyes remained cold. "You think you can stop me? I have allies, people in high places. Even if you take me down now, others will continue the work I started. It's the cycle of life. You can't stop something bigger than yourself, Hamilton," she said, with unsettling confidence. Matthews stepped forward, moving even closer to Victoria, his expression hardening. "This isn't bigger than justice. Victoria Rhodes, you're under arrest for child trafficking, document forgery, and criminal conspiracy. Surrender now, and maybe you'll still have a chance at a fair trial," he said, his voice steady and firm. Victoria glanced around, realizing she was cornered. Officers had already started rescuing the children, guiding them out of the room to safety. She knew she had nowhere left to go. Still, her expression remained unchanged. She seemed almost resigned, as if she had known this moment would arrive sooner or later. "Very well, Mr. Hamilton." "Commissioner Matthews." "I'll go with you," Victoria said, finally raising her hands in surrender. Though her gaze remained cold and calculating, the officers quickly moved in to handcuff Victoria, while Nicholas watched silently. He knew the hardest part was still ahead. They would need to ensure all the evidence was gathered, that every child received proper care, and that Victoria and her accomplices were prosecuted thoroughly. But, for now, he felt a small relief seeing the nightmare Victoria had created finally coming to an end. As the officers began leading Victoria out, Nicholas took one last look around the room. The children were being brought to safety, but he knew the scars they carried wouldn't heal so easily. He also knew that, while this battle had been won, the fight against child trafficking was far from over. But he was committed. He would do everything within his power to make sure these children had a future. As he left the orphanage, Nicholas walked toward the hallway where the last child remained. A small girl with wide, frightened eyes, clutching an old doll tightly to her chest. Nicholas kneeled down to her level, offering a gentle smile. "Hey, it's all right now. You're safe," he said, trying to reassure her. The girl looked at him with a mix of fear and hope before giving a small nod. She didn't say a word, but Nicholas knew that little gesture meant a lot. She, like the others, had been saved from something horrible, and now she could finally start to heal. Matthews approached Nicholas as the officers continued to guide the children out of the building. "Good job, Hamilton. None of this could have happened without you, but there's still a lot to do. We need to make sure everyone involved gets arrested and that these kids are taken somewhere they can start to heal," Matthews said, a look of exhaustion mixed with satisfaction on his face. Nicholas nodded, fully aware that the work was far from over. "I know, Matthews. We'll make sure justice is served. These kids deserve it," he replied, as they stepped out of the building. Outside, the police team was already organizing the rescued children, offering them immediate medical and psychological support. Victoria was being placed in a squad car, her hands cuffed, her gaze distant, as though she was lost in thoughts far beyond the immediate chaos around her. Nicholas watched as the car drove away with Victoria inside. He knew they'd won a battle, but the true victory would only come once all the children were safe and every person involved in the trafficking ring was arrested and brought to justice. As the night wore on and the operation wrapped up, Nicholas felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. It had been a long road to get here, but he knew they'd done the right thing. Lucy and Ryan, along with all the other rescued children, would now have a chance at a life free from the horrors they had endured. As the sun began to rise on the horizon, Nicholas and the police team prepared to return to the station to begin the lengthy process of documenting and charging everyone involved. Nicholas braced himself for what would be another long day, but he was ready to face it. He had the resolve of a man who knew that, despite all the challenges, justice was worth every effort. The sun over San Diego, which had seemed reluctant to break through the clouds, now shone brightly, casting the city in a soft, golden light. It was a new day, but for Nicholas Hamilton, it still felt as though he was stuck in the long night before. The operation at the children's shelter had been a success, but the emotional and physical toll weighed on him as he and Commissioner Matthews drove Victoria Rhodes, now handcuffed, back to the station. What followed was a whirlwind of legal and bureaucratic tasks, stretching into the early morning hours. When they arrived at the station, Victoria was taken to an interrogation room, where she'd be held under close watch while Nicholas and Matthews gathered all necessary evidence to ensure she'd face full prosecution. The woman, who had maintained a cool and calculated demeanor until now, finally seemed to grasp the seriousness of her situation. Her once confident eyes now held a faint trace of despair, though she didn't utter a word as officers escorted her. Nicholas watched as Victoria was led inside the station, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Satisfaction at having finally caught her and halted her criminal activities, but sadness knowing that, for many of the children involved, the emotional scars would take years, perhaps a lifetime to heal. But he knew that with Victoria in custody, those kids at least had a chance to rebuild their lives. Inside the station, Nicholas met up with Justin Sherman, the lawyer he'd contacted earlier. Justin had been there since dawn, working through documents and preparing the legal strategies to ensure Victoria and her network couldn't slip through any loopholes in the justice system. Nicholas, great work out there. I reviewed everything we've got so far. The evidence is solid, and with the kids' testimonies and Jeffrey's statement, we have a strong case against Victoria. We're going to make sure she pays for everything she's done, Justin said, with the firmness of someone who knew he was standing on the right side of justice. Nicholas felt grateful for Justin's support, aware that there was still a lot of work ahead, but for now he felt they'd taken a huge step in the right direction. Thanks, Justin. I'll make sure everything is done right. These kids deserve justice, and we're going to give it to them, Nicholas replied, his voice filled with clear determination. With Justin handling the legal side, Nicholas turned his focus to what he saw as the most urgent PR hodacity, making sure the rescued children received the care and support they desperately needed. He joined Matthews and other officers in a small room at the station where the first accounts from the children were being gathered. Social workers and psychologists had been called in to assist, ensuring the kids could start working through their trauma in a safe, supportive environment. Lucy and Ryan, like the other children, were among those rescued. Lucy, who initially seemed frightened and withdrawn, gradually began to open up to the social workers, answering questions with growing confidence as she started to realize she was in a safe place. Ryan, still too young to fully grasp what was happening, stayed close to his sister, seeking comfort from the one familiar person around him. Nicholas watched from a distance, doing his best not to interfere with the work of the professionals. However, his attention kept drifting to Lucy, who sat in a small chair, holding Ryan close with one arm, as she calmly responded to the social worker's questions. He couldn't help but smile as he observed her resilience, something he never expected from a girl her age. Lucy had been through so much, yet here she was, keeping her head up, protecting her brother, and starting to adapt to this new reality. Nicholas knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy for her, but he was determined to be there for her every step of the way. After gathering the initial statements, the social workers began discussing where the children would be placed temporarily. Many of these kids didn't have family to return to, and Nicholas understood that, while foster care was better than the nightmare they had endured, it could still be a complex and challenging system. He felt a knot in his stomach, thinking about the uncertainty these children would face, even after being rescued. At that moment, Nicholas made a decision that would change his life forever. He approached one of the social workers and asked directly What's going to happen to Lucy and Ryan? Do they have any relatives who can take care of them? The social worker, a kind-looking woman named Maria, looked at Nicholas with a sad expression. "We're still checking records, Mr. Hamilton, but as far as we know, Lucy and Ryan don't have any close family. They'll likely be placed in temporary care until we find a permanent solution. But given their circumstances, that could take some time," Maria explained, trying to be as honest as possible. Nicholas stood silent for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision he was about to make. He knew his life was about to change dramatically, but he also understood that he couldn't turn his back on those children. Something had shifted in him since that night when he found Noana in the rain, and he felt he was meant to be part of her life. "I'd like to apply to become the temporary guardian for Noana and Ryan," Nicholas said at last, his voice steady but laced with a slight tremor of emotion. Marta looked at him, clearly surprised, but after a moment's thought, her expression softened into a smile. "Mr. Hamilton, this is a big step. We'll need to conduct an assessment, but given everything you've done for these children, I believe we can start the process. It's going to be challenging and will take time, but if you're truly committed, we'll do everything we can to support you," Marta responded, her tone encouraging. Nicholas nodded, feeling a blend of relief and nervousness. "I'm committed, Marta. Whatever it takes. I can't abandon these kids now, not after all they've been through," he said, with the certainty of someone who had finally found his purpose. With his decision made, Nicholas began discussing the next steps with Marta and other officials. They explained the legal requirements and the steps he'd need to follow to become Noana and Ryan's temporary guardian. Though the road ahead would be long and complicated, Nicholas felt more determined than ever to see it through. As this was unfolding, Matthews walked into the room with urgent news. "Hamilton, we've got updates on the investigation. We managed to intercept communications from Victoria, and we're tracking other members of the network. It looks like more people are involved than we initially thought. We'll need your help to keep dismantling this operation," Matthews stated bluntly. Though still absorbing his new role as guardian for Noana and Ryan, Nicholas knew the fight was far from over. Victoria's capture was just the beginning. They had to ensure that every person involved faced justice and that no other child would be harmed by that criminal network. "I'm with you, Matthews. Let's keep going until they're all caught," Nicholas replied, feeling energy course through him. He knew he couldn't rest while other children remained in danger. As they delved into the plans for the next stages of the investigation, Nicholas couldn't ignore the profound shift in his life. What had begun as a straightforward pursuit, him, a businessman with everything seemingly in control, had transformed into a deeply personal mission. Now, he found himself devoted to a cause he hadn't anticipated, standing as an advocate for justice and, unexpectedly, preparing himself for fatherhood. The day seemed to pass in a blur, with the team working tirelessly at the police station. Matthews and his fellow officers were fully focused on tracking down everyone tied to Victoria's operation. Meanwhile, Nicholas took on the role of organizing the evidence meticulously and coordinating the upcoming steps with the attorneys and social workers. He was fully aware that the legal road ahead could be grueling and prolonged, yet he took comfort in knowing he held undeniable evidence and a community that stood behind him. As the afternoon drew to a close and the sun began its descent, casting a soft, warm glow across the sky, Marta approached Nicholas with some initial paperwork. These documents were the first step in securing temporary custody of Lucy and Ryan. Holding the pen to sign, Nicholas felt an almost physical sense of relief, as though a heavy weight was lifting from him. At last, he was beginning to offer these children the stability and home they so desperately needed. With the papers signed, Nicholas made his way to the room where Lucy and Ryan were resting. Upon entering, he saw Ryan engaged with a few toys that the social workers had brought along. Ryan looked up at him with a pure, innocent smile that tugged at Nicholas's heart. Kneeling beside Lucy, Nicholas met her gaze, trying to convey his sincerity. "Lucy," he said gently, "I spoke with the social workers. If you're open to it, you and Ryan could come live with me. It wouldn't have to be permanent, but until we find a lasting solution, I would be honored to have you stay with me." His voice was steady, though his heart raced, hoping she would feel comfortable enough to say yes. Lucy sat in silence for a moment, absorbing his words. Her young eyes held a depth and maturity beyond her years, and after a moment, they softened as she gave a small nod. "I'd like that, Mr. Nicholas, and Ryan too," she responded with a shy smile. Nicholas felt an immense surge of emotion at her words, realizing what this meant for them both. He knew this was just one step in a challenging journey, but this small victory felt monumental. "Then it's settled," he said softly, wrapping his arms around Lucy and Ryan with gentle warmth. "We're going home together." As he held them close, Nicholas felt an overwhelming sense of peace, a calm he hadn't experienced in years. It was a feeling of being anchored, as if, after a long pier host of drifting, he'd finally arrived where he was meant to be. In the weeks that followed, life became a whirlwind of adjustments and responsibilities. Nicholas and his new family started settling into life together, each day bringing new routines, shared meals, and quiet moments where bonds formed between them. While he spent time with Lucy and Ryan, he also worked relentlessly with Matthews and the legal team, ensuring that Victoria and her criminal network were taken down once and for all. The case quickly gained attention, and soon local media began covering the story. It wasn't long before the narrative of the children's rescue and Victoria's capture reached audiences across the country. The challenges Nicholas faced were daunting, yet he knew he was ready to tackle each one head-on. In the midst of this journey, Nicholas discovered something new, a sense of purpose beyond business achievements and personal accolades. For the first time, he found a mission that spoke to him on a deeper level, one he wanted to commit his life to. The legal battle against Victoria's network was long and exhausting. Every step demanded strength, resilience, and patience. But eventually, justice prevailed. Victoria was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, and the remaining members of her organization faced prosecution and punishment as well. The children who had been rescued were placed in safe, caring homes where they could finally begin the process of healing and rebuilding their lives. For Lucy and Ryan, the time spent with Nicholas as their temporary guardian quickly became something much more profound. With each passing month, Nicholas's attachment to Lucy and Ryan deepened, and soon he began the official steps toward adopting them. He knew it wouldn't be an easy road, but his determination to provide them with the family and security they deserved never wavered. That following spring, on a clear and sunny day in San Diego, Nicholas, Lucy, and Ryan walked into the courthouse to finalize the adoption. The day was charged with emotion, a turning point where a new family was legally recognized. As they left the courthouse, Lucy slipped her small hand into Nicholas's and looked up at him with a smile that spoke volumes. "Thank you for everything, Dad," she said softly, the words carrying a weight and warmth that made Nicholas's heart swell. He stopped for a moment, visibly touched, and then smiled, a deep contentment filling him. "No, Lucy," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm the one who should be thanking you. You've given me a new life." He pulled both siblings into a gentle, heartfelt embrace, cherishing the moment. Together, Nicholas, Lucy, and Ryan walked through the vibrant, bustling streets of the city, the warmth of the sun illuminating their path. Nicholas knew he had finally found what he had been searching for, not simply professional success or personal satisfaction, but something far more meaningful. It was love, family, and the fulfillment of knowing he was making a positive impact on the lives of those he loved. And so, with the city humming around them, Nicholas, Lucy, and Ryan walked forward as a family, facing a future filled with hope and unity. They understood this was only the beginning of their story, but they were confident that together they could overcome any obstacle. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support is invaluable to us. And now, a new inspiring story awaits you on your screen.